Hello friends, Tanya here for Spellbinders, and today we're going to play with some of the February 2024 releases. This collection is the Through the Arbor Garden. This is the Mock Orange die set. It is a beautiful, very realistic flower die set put out by Susan Tierney-Cockburn. She has an amazing collection of gorgeous, very realistic die-cut flowers and foliage. She also creates a video for each of these die sets to show you exactly how to make the most realistic, most beautiful creation with those dies. I did watch hers before I started making mine because I always love to get tips from the pro and often from the creator of the dies, so I know how best to use them. And then I can go forth and try to make my own little twists on it. I took all of the dies and I die cut them with some white cardstock, and I'm using alcohol markers here to color my branch. It was just easier to start with white and add my color since brown and green are very different colors, so it would have been a little harder to start with a colored cardstock. I'm using, I believe, G94 and G99 for the leaves, and E23 and E25, I believe, for the branches. I'm laying down the darker color and then coming back with the lighter color and blending those together, and I am coloring both sides of this branch. I have a piece of scrap cardstock, scrap copy paper actually, underneath so that I don't get the alcohol marker all over my craft mat. I did die cut 3 of these branches, and I die cut I think 14, enough of the flower pieces to make 14 flowers, in the hopes that I could stretch this into 2 or 3 or 4 cards. I did ultimately make 3 cards. There is our beautiful branch. I'm just adding a little more green into the branch of this to make it a little more seamless. Next, we have the stamens that are going to be in the centers of the flower. These were again cut with white, and I'm going through with a very light yellow to add some color to these. And there they are, and I did color both sides of those. Now I'm going to use the leaf tool to add some creases to our leaves, just doing that center vein on each of them. This is on the right side of the, it's on the wrong side of the branch. And I'm going to fold these down. This is all according to Susan's instructions. She uses pan pastels a lot, and I did go ahead and buy these off of Amazon a while back because I was very into making the Susan Tierney-Cockburn flowers for a while, and then I had to take a break because I didn't have enough time to do them. They are kind of labor intensive, but they are so beautiful. The results are very worth the time. Now I've added a little bit of that pan pastel across that center vein, and I'm adding more veining on the right side of these leaves now, being careful not to cross the center vein. Once I have all of that veining complete, I'm going to take my tweezers and bend up. Now this is from the right side, not the wrong side. And then I'm going to curl the edges and the tips of each of these leaves. I did start out with my reverse tweezers, and I found this a little more clumsy, and eventually I do switch to my fine tip regular tweezers. All of these are available in the Susan's Garden Ultimate Toolkit, and that's where I got the special tips for the all-in-one tool and the leaf pad there, and there's another tool that we'll use in a little bit that helps with shaping all of your different foliage and flowers that Susan Tierney-Cockburn comes out with. If you enjoy using her die sets, then you probably want to get this toolkit. I tried to make do with things I had in my craft room and ultimately found that it was best to just go ahead and get this toolkit. Now I have the petals for the mock oranges. I'm using the loop tool from the Susan's Ultimate Toolkit. And I'm curling these branches. I'm using my tweezer to crease the center. And then I'm going to go back and curl each edge and the tip of each of these petals. I'm going to go through and do this with all 28 pieces because again, I'm making 14 flowers. And this did take me probably, I don't know, maybe an hour to make all 3 branches of these flowers. And I did use the pan pastels to add a little bit of green to the centers of these. Now it's time to start gluing these together. I have my Barely Art Precision Glue here. I add just a dot. I use my ball stylus here to press into the center and cup this flower, and I'm going to let that dry. I'm just going to show you how to make one of these flowers, and you can rewind and replay this as many times as you need. Now the stamens, we're going to take our little snips and snip down the center of each of these little pieces to make that stamen a nice fine, each of those stamens a nice fine little thing. You can't really do that with a die, so it's useful to use the die and then trim these stamens down a little bit. So you're going to take your piece, add a line of glue, and then twirl it over itself. I'm using my reverse tweezers to hold the end together for it to dry. And then we're going to spread out the stamens so they create that inner blossom circular look there. Just using the tip of my tweezer again to kind of help open those with a finer detail. And then the reverse tweezers acts like a really great extra hand as I'm adding glue and then dipping it into the paper pollen. I happen to have some from Nouveau, but the colors that I really want are from the paper pollen that Spellbinders carries in the store. I actually have those waiting in my cart for me to hit purchase. This is more of a golden yellow. I really need more of a bright yellow for this particular flower, but we'll use what we've got. There is one completed mock orange blossom. My understanding is these smell very much like orange when they're blooming. That's why they got the name mock orange. They don't actually grow into oranges. We're going to add a cluster of 3 of these on the larger leaf section of this branch. Just adding a little bit of glue to the end of our flower and then applying that to the leafy portion of the branch and letting that glue dry. Now you can do this when it's attached to your project, but I really just wanted to add these to the branches and let those dry and have them ready to go for a project. More so I could demonstrate this and actually so I could play with placement. Here we're going to add 2 flowers to this second grouping. I have done a couple of branches with a total of 5 blossoms and 1 branch with 4 blossoms. Next, we're going to use the Essential Arches dies, and we're going to use that with the Arbor and Ivy 3D embossing folder, which is really special. It fits with the arches very nicely, but it's a little longer. So I measured that arch, which it was about 6 1/4 inches long and 4 1/4 inches wide. So I'm going to take this arch that fits over it perfectly. It's the largest arch in the group. I'm going to use some Best Ever Craft tape to tape the edges down. This sits just inside the die cutting edges there. And we're going to do some partial die cutting. I'm just going to cover the portion that I want to cut, which is the top of the arch. And I ran that through the die cut machine. And even though I lined that up very carefully, I can still see a little bit of an edge. Oh, here I'm showing you how it fits perfectly over our embossed area on this embossing folder. The ends of the columns line up with the bottom of this arch, just perfect. So I ran that through the die cut machine. And then I'm going to take a little sanding block and smooth out that edge there because it wasn't perfect and I really wanted it to smoothly flow into the curve of the arch. Next, we're going to take some pearl luster gilding polish and we're going to add a little extra detail to the arch so it stands out better against this white cardstock. I was really just playing around. I didn't have a real solid idea yet of what I was going to do with this. And sometimes I just end up creating a bunch of different elements and figuring out how I want to combine them later. And maybe you can tell sometimes my cards are not as put together, as coordinated as I might like. This is again the Arbor and Ivy 3D embossing folder, and you can see there's a die in here. That is for this ivy border that is in the top of the embossing folder. I have a 2-inch by 5.5-inch piece of green cardstock here. We're going to run that through the embossing folder, and you can see that gorgeous embossed detail. We'll line up the coordinating die and run that through the die cutting machine again. And it does flatten the design out a little bit. So I'm going to run it through the embossing folder again. Just going to make sure it all fits inside the grooves again in the same fashion, so you don't get any double embossing. Now that that's run through the embossing folder again, we have this gorgeous detail. I'm going to try using some pan pastels here. I have 3 of these borders die cut, ready to go for however I end up deciding to use this. I'm using just an eyeshadow applicator. I bought, I think, a box of 100 of these. They'll last me the rest of my life, especially since I don't wear makeup. But they do work well with pastels and a variety of other mediums. Just going to try these 2 different colors to see how I like them on this green paper. They do add some extra dimension, and since they are the colors that I used with the mock oranges, I thought maybe they would coordinate more nicely with the project that way. I brushed away some extra with my microfiber cloth. Next, we're going to take this gorgeous Serenade of Autumn vellum with the foiling on it, and I took one of the essential arches, found one that would match the inside arc of our arch, our arbor, and die cut that. I did partial die cutting with that too, I believe, maybe not. And then I took this gorgeous flowers and vines embossing folder, and I cut a piece of cardstock that is 4.5 by 6.5 inches and ran that through this embossing folder. I'm taking the slippery when wet lunar paste and using my finger to apply some of this paste directly to the raised portions of this embossing folder, embossed panel. And I just love the way this gilding turns out, especially on this particular embossing folder. This is the same one I did the watercoloring, a blend, and then did the paste over the top, and I was just so impressed with the result of that. I think this really looks lovely. And if I had stopped and done the vine maybe in white instead, or in gold, and then did a little gilding on here, I think it might have looked a little better. I think the green is a little too much, but you let me know what you think. I decided to add some gilding to the top of the flowers, the ivy, to try and bring that into the feel of the rest of the card. And remember, these strips are 5.5 inches long, so we're going to go ahead and trim these down to 4.5 inches wide for the front of the card and just under 5 inches for the inside of the card, because that's how I'm going to carry the design from the front of the card into the inside of the card. Just use my guillotine trimmer to do that. I've added some extra cardstock behind each of these layers, and I'm going to add this to a 5x7 card base. We've got our arch, which I again put extra cardstock behind that. Going to try to center that on our embossed panel, all coming together beautifully. Now, vellum is notoriously hard to hide the adhesive. I am taking the Bearly Art Precision Glue and I am putting a very thin layer all over the vellum, and that is my solution for this particular card to add this to the to adhere it down to our paper. This piece did not need to be elevated. I just wanted that extra pop of foiling on the inside of the arch. Here I've got a piece of that ivy, and I'm going to adhere that directly onto our card base here. Just using that heavyweight block to help everything adhere well. Giving it a little time and pressure always helps. We'll take our mock orange branch here, and it looks like it's growing up out of the ivies, and it creates this beautiful backdrop or detail for the happy anniversary. This is from the You Are Everything Sentiment Better Press. It presses and die cuts all in one plate. Well, there's a plate for the embossing, or sorry, the better pressing or gilding if you want to do the foiling, and one plate for all of the dies to die cut the sentiments, which I adore. Here's our finished first card. Our second card, we're going to use the Because 3D embossing folder. It's got this beautiful honeycomb image with a bunch of little bees scattered across it. I embossed this 4.5 by 6.5 inch piece of cardstock with this embossing folder, and I have this Bright Sunshine gilding polish, which is comparable to the Slippery When Wet lunar paste. I'm also going to use some Wild Honey Distress Oxide. I'm going to ink that over the entire panel. I don't want a solid inking. I want some of the craft cardstock to show through. This happens to be Desert Storm. I decided to do the Bright Sunshine gilding polish just for a change of pace to see how this looks. It's a little brighter, a little more yellow gold than the Slippery When Wet. And it has this, it has the application tool, which was really my main reason for doing this. I need to have a dedicated sponge for the Slippery When Wet since I use it that way so much. Next, I took the Infinity Hexagons from Hero Arts and die cut a vellum hexagon. And you can see I'm using mailers again on the back of my cardstock just because it was super easy. One large piece fits behind my panel here, which I do need that extra. Next, I have the Bee Stitched stitching die of the month from January 2024. I still had one stitched bee all ready to go from when I did my 10 card video. Oftentimes I make more elements that I use during my 10 card video, and I was super happy to have this. I think in the back of my mind I had extras because I knew that this embossing folder was coming up and I wanted to use these together. I'm adding some extra cardstock behind the vellum. I did add an extra piece of cardstock under the black body of the bee before I adhered that to the vellum, and then again another layer under the vellum. We want that to pop up just a little bit, and this is how I am solving the vellum issue with this card. Just making sure that I'm adhering it behind the vellum. Next, I'm taking this scrapbook.com honeycomb emboss, what's it called? Stencil, and the Altenew Stamp Wheel Grid Mat to help me hold that in place. I did not push that down into the sticky mat well enough, so I ended up just holding on to it. It didn't have to be super, it isn't a layering stencil, so it didn't matter as much. We're going to use the Just Because stamp and die of the month from January 2024. Both the stitching die and this stamp and clear stamp and die set are still available in the Spellbinders shop. So if you didn't get those in the kit, then you can still get them in the store. I stamped the sentiments with some white pigment ink on some black cardstock, and we're going to use some white embossing powder here. Just after or before I stamped these, I did use an anti-static powder tool, and now we're going to heat set these to have some gorgeous sentiments that are very bee themed. I love how this turned out. Happy birthday and have a beautiful day. There's also some very sweet little honeybees that actually look very reminiscent. They tie into the bees on the embossing folder very nicely. I stamped those with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, which is not your best option for alcohol ink coloring, and I forget that frequently. It's easy to actually smear the black outline. So as you can see, I'm just more or less dabbing my alcohol marker onto my areas so I don't smear the ink. I could have just restamped them with some alcohol friendly ink. I just didn't think about it. I'm using a warm gray. I think this is W5 and W3 to color the heads, which would be black. You don't want them too black, otherwise the eyes don't actually show up. I'm going to use W0 to color the wings, just so there's a little color to the translucentness of those. And I'm using some clear Wink of Stella here to add sparkle to the wings. I do ultimately dry those with a heat tool because the clear Wink of Stella was a little dry, and I dipped them in water first, or dipped it in water first, and it was a little wetter than I intended then. We're going to use some clear embossing powder here that I have in my bin, and seal the color in. And the clear Wink of Stella had been dried with the heat tool, so that didn't add any clear embossing there. We'll take the coordinating dies for both sentiments and the bees and run that through my sidekick here. Very slick. And I did take some extra cardstock and die cut a couple extra layers of the sentiment that's going to go on the front of the card. I just used the best ever craft tape in 2 different widths here to secure those dies, and there they are, all die cut. We're going to glue those layers together to create a little extra stability and a little extra height, so this stands out nicely on our card front. You can see the card that we're working on leaning there, and I'm trying to decide where I'm going to put that sentiment. I want it to overlap the hexagon a little bit so it stays tied into the rest of the main image. Now we'll take the inside sentiment and adhere that in the honeycomb area that we ink blended or stenciled. And now we'll add our cute little bees. Now normally I don't mix other companies in with Spellbinders stuff, but I just couldn't resist. I have a collection of bee themed things in my stash and I wanted to use them, and I didn't have an equivalent that Spellbinders sold. This is the bamboo trellis die set, another one of the things from the Through the Arbor Garden collection, and it is so pretty. It does die cut one bamboo piece, the trellis piece here. I am going to reinforce that with a second layer, and you can see I have 4 pieces here. I actually die cut them from 2 different craft colored cardstocks. I didn't realize I had 2 different colors, but that's okay. Now that that has dried, we're going to take these little crosshatch and straight binding pieces here, and we're going to add those to each intersection. All of these pieces are identical, so you don't have to worry about matching the right cross with the right spot. I just added little X's of glue all over in each of the spots that I needed, and I'm using my pickup tool to place these. It is the easiest way to do this. Just going to go through and add these cute little X's to all of the intersections. I'll take this moment to talk a little bit about what's been going on in my life. I have mentioned before that I am an ER nurse and that my day job changed fairly recently, a few months ago. And my new job, I have to alternate nights and days. And I just came off of some night shifts not that long ago, while I was trying to do my 10 cards video. And I have to tell you, I am getting too old for this flipping back and forth business. I had such a night shift hangover that I was sleeping way more than I should be, and it was a few hours here, a few hours there, and practically falling asleep all the time. Now, flipping back, it's a little hard to get sleep at a normal time. And I have to tell you, more than one person has told me I have a soothing voice on our videos here. Well, little secret, sometimes I listen to my own videos because they put me to sleep. I hope they don't put you all to sleep, unless that's what you're listening to my videos for. If that's what you need, a soothing, quiet time video, then by all means. Do my videos put anyone else to sleep? I'd love to know that in the comments, believe it or not. Oh, golly. We have almost finished all of these little cross ties and X's, and you can add extra if you want. You can add fewer if you want. I just used the shape of the die to tell me where these were supposed to go, and I do believe it takes 2 full die cuttings of each of these shapes to have enough to cover the entire die cut. Now, I am using both pieces of trellis on the same card because when you glue them together, they create a 4 1/4 by 6 1/4 inch piece of trellis. You could trim this apart into whatever size you wanted once you had glued it together. And I'm adding just little dots of glue on the ends of these open pieces of trellis. I'm using my grid mat to help me make sure that these line up nice and straight for our finished project here. And you can see I have 2 branches of mock orange to the side. We're going to use some Distress Oxide antique linen on a, I believe this is 4 1/2 by 6 1/2 inches. And I'm going to cover this, but not completely. I mean, mostly. I'm not trying to go for a very clean, even blend. Just, I want to change the color of this to more of a cream tone because I'm going to use a craft card base for this. And again, it's going to be a 5 by 7 card. We're going to use the Simon Hurley Woven 3D embossing folder. This came out in a different collection this month, and I will be using that also, but I thought it was the perfect backdrop for this trellis and the mock orange. We're going to use the Distress Oxide ink, the Distress ink of the antique linen over the top of the Oxide antique linen. I'm using this sponge or mini ink blending tool first. As you can see, it's bringing out more of the details of the embossing. And as I'm going through, I decide I want a little more coverage. So this will add a 3rd deepening or 3rd depth of color of antique linen. And you can see how that really brought it out. Again, using a mailer here to back my cardstock. So if you don't have a lot of scraps of cardstock to add as an extra layer, another affordable way to do this is to use your mailers, all of those things that you get in the mail that you would normally throw away that are just a little bit heavier than regular paper, more of a cardstock weight, and it just adds that perfect extra bit of dimension and stability. To adhere our trellis, which is all double layered, I add just a little extra, or just a bead of Barely Art precision glue, and I adhere that down, and it actually stuck pretty easily. I didn't even have to put a heavyweight block on top of it. Then we're going to take our first branch of mock orange and adhere that to our trellis. I do use the pointy end of my pickup stick to help give that a little extra pressure. and time to adhere. You can't really put a heavyweight block on top of these very dimensional flowers. And now we'll take that last branch of mock oranges and join that up, just kind of tucking the end of that branch under the bunch, the 3 flower bunch, and using that same technique of adding some extra pressure with the pointy tool and my finger to help that adhere really well. For our sentiment, we're going to use the must-have sentiments glimmer of the month, or sorry, glimmer foil. This is another Simon Hurley collection from the photosynthesis collection. Sorry, it's another Simon Hurley product from the photosynthesis collection that came out last spring, I believe. I'm going to take some extra cardstock to add extra dimension and stability behind this again. This glimmer foil set has one plate that does several sentiments and then die cuts all of them at once. I have a bunch of these already created and stored in my quick and easy sentiment storage system, which I will try to link in the top corner here. Once I've adhered that, I decided I needed some more flowers for the inside of the card. Now I did do the loop tool curling of these petals. I did not use my tweezer to curl any of the edges, and I used a yellow alcohol marker to color the centers of these because we're not going to put the stamens in these. I also have one branch that I die cut and colored with Copic markers or alcohol markers. I did not use the leaf tool at all. So this is a less dimensional version of these flowers. So if you wanted to do a little less work to create with these, this is what you could do. And now I'm going to take these and put them on the inside of the card. They can't have all of the dimension that they had on the front of the card, or it would not close. And I'm just testing my how well this card closes with these flowers before I just commit to gluing them down. And I think they add a very nice touch to the inside of this already very dimensional card. Now to add a little extra detail, I've taken one of the YR markers. I believe this is YR 27. And I'm adding little dots to the insides of those flowers to add a little extra specialness. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed playing with all of the products to create these cards. If you did enjoy it, please give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, now is a great time to do that. If you are interested in any of the product that I use, check that description box below. They will be listed and linked there as always. There is a visual list link also that will have the most complete listing, as they most often don't all fit in the description box. Here are a couple more videos I thought you might enjoy, and until next time, bye-bye.